Be seated. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. When I sit down with a family to plan a funeral, we go over various important details like, do you want to sing hymns? And if so, which ones? Would you like to have communion? What Bible passages do you want to have read at your loved one's service, and who shall read them? But even more than those details, I want to sit down with the family for a while. And I want to find out from them how they feel about their loved one. What made you laugh about them? What drove you crazy about them? What were they proud of? What do you think you would like to learn from their life? What do you think needs to be left behind? What are you feeling right now? And people say different things. To some people, the loved one's death doesn't make a lot of sense. They'll say, why did God take my beloved person, my beloved spouse, my beloved child, my beloved mother so early? We had decades to go. And other people will say, why didn't God take my beloved mother, my beloved grandfather sooner? He suffered for a long time. He was in pain. He couldn't remember anything. It was hard. It doesn't make sense. Sometimes I'm honored to share their grief, your grief. This is really, really important. Because I can stand up here and I can talk about heaven's golden streets till I'm blue in the face. But it will be so much deeper and so much more real if, before I start talking about God's life, we share a little bit of death together. Before I start saying goodness is stronger than evil, and love is stronger than hate, and light is stronger than darkness, and life is stronger than death, I need to be with you. We need to be with each other in the midst of the times when it doesn't look that way, when things don't make sense. Then it's real. The gospel lesson for today tells one of Jesus' greatest miracles. This miracle is a sign. A sign is a particular kind of miracle that Jesus does in the Gospel of John. And that it's a kind of miracle that shows us what God is like. And so we see Jesus raises his friend Lazarus from the grave. So clearly, we learn from this miracle that God's life and God's hope and God's power and God's love reaches beyond death. It's deeper than death, more powerful than death. But if we look closely, we will find out even more. So the story begins. Jesus is far away from his friends Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, who live in Bethany, which is near Jerusalem. Jesus is far away. And he hears that his friend Lazarus is sick. And Jesus does something that doesn't make sense. He waits around for 2 days. Okay? And he says something churchy, like this illness is not toward death, but is toward the glory of God. And something like that. He waits around for 2 days, and I'm going, really, Jesus? Your friend, Lazarus, whom you love, and Mary and Martha, whom you love, they are your friends. They've called for you to come to help, and you're hanging around here watching TV? Really? Doesn't make sense. This is what God is like, though. God lets things happen that don't make sense. And we deal with that in a couple of ways. We talk about that in a couple of ways. We have a faith that God's life and power and hope and love are deeper than death itself. That's true. Some of us will say that this is a part of God's plan. God has a plan, and that somehow, someday, we might understand it. We don't understand it now, but it's a plan for the good. And I would like to say I respect that. I probably wouldn't say it that way, but I respect that for two reasons. First of all, it is comforting to our souls. And secondly, it's humble. It says that God is bigger than we are, and that we don't have to understand everything. We don't have to control everything. Everything doesn't have to be clear to us. I respect that. Now, the way I would say it would be, whether God has a plan or not, God draws good out of evil. And God pulls us into drawing good out of evil, so that whatever situation we might find ourselves in, even if it doesn't make sense, our task and God's power is the same. We draw good out of evil because it's true. It's true. Goodness is stronger than evil. Love is stronger than hate. Light is stronger than darkness. Life is stronger than death. Jesus finally gets to Bethany, and Martha walks up to him. And the very first words out of her mouth are this cry of anguish and maybe of anger, maybe both at the same time. She says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." This doesn't make sense. Notice Jesus does not cut her off. He does not shut her down. He does not criticize her. What does he do? He responds by saying, essentially, goodness is stronger than evil, and love is stronger than hate, and light is stronger than darkness, and life is stronger than death. He says, your brother will rise again. She says, I know that he will rise on the last day at the resurrection. Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me will not die. Even though they die, they will live. So that the resurrection doesn't just wait for us beyond the grave. It does, most certainly. Heaven does not just wait for us beyond the grave. Yes, it does, most certainly. But heaven also breaks into this moment, this day, right now, in our lives. Through the presence of Jesus, I am the resurrection and the life. And Jesus is with us. No matter how deep our despair, no matter how profound our grief, even if we don't see it, God is there. Jesus is with us in that place. Martha goes to get her sister Mary. And Mary comes to Jesus, and she says the exact same thing that Martha says. She says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And this time Jesus doesn't say anything, really. What he does is he sees. He looks and he sees Mary weeping. And her friends weeping. And Jesus weeps. This is what God is like. Sometimes God lets things happen that don't make any sense. But God also weeps with us, is heartbroken with us. When we feel the depth of grief and the pangs of despair, even if we don't see it, God is weeping with us and feeling the pain with us. They take Jesus to the tomb. And now that Jesus has wept with them, he pushes them And he challenges them, and he pokes them, and he prods them. And he says to Martha, open the tomb. This is something that doesn't make sense. Sometimes God will be asking us in the midst of difficult times and situations and circumstances that don't make any sense. God is going to ask us to do things that don't make sense. Because goodness is stronger than evil, and love is stronger than hate, and light is stronger than darkness, and life is stronger than death. That's why. He says, open up the tomb. Martha, being of a practical nature, says, Jesus, it stinks. It's been 4 days. You want me to open it up? This makes no sense, Jesus. You want to open up the tomb. Death has prevailed. Jesus asked us to do things that don't seem to make sense to us. Sometimes when we are in grief, and sometimes when we are in situations that don't seem to make sense. For example, we wake up in the morning, we see no purpose in getting up out of bed. Why should I get out of bed? It stinks. Jesus says, get up out of bed. He says, did I not tell you that if you believe you will see the glory of God? Well, you don't see it right now, but get up out of bed. And go outside and walk around the block one time. Or just stand there and breathe the air. Because there is something deeper than this grief. There is something deeper than this tragedy, this pain. There is something even deeper. Because goodness is stronger than evil. Love is stronger than hate. Light is stronger than darkness. And life is stronger than death. We have addictions. And Jesus says, get to a place that can help you with the addictions. Get to a group that will help you overcome the addictions. You can't do it alone. Well, I've tried it before. Yeah, well, keep trying. Don't give up. Find somebody that can pray with you and listen to you if there's a depression in your life. And we say, that's not something I'm accustomed to. Well, Jesus said, well, try it out because it's better than what you're going through right now. Jesus pokes us and prods us to do things that don't make sense. Now, I have my 1 minute thing about the election. Hang in there. This will be all right. No matter who wins, okay, there are going to be some of us who are really, really sad. Okay? One way or the other, somebody's going to be sad. So I'm going to say this to everybody, okay? Even if you feel like the world is coming apart and your person didn't go the way you wanted them to, nevertheless, Jesus is going to say something that doesn't make sense, and that is, get up and do something good. Do something that you believe will bring in the power of God into the world that has to do with the love of God and the compassion of God and the hope of God and the integrity of God and the honor of God. Find one thing, and you don't have to do everything. One thing, the whole world might be coming apart, but one thing, you do one thing. This actually goes for whether your person wins or not. Okay? It doesn't make sense. Everything's coming apart. Why should I get up the hope and the energy to do one thing? Because goodness is stronger than evil, and love is stronger than hate, and light is stronger than darkness, and life is stronger than death. If you believe, did I not tell you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? So Martha, she does this thing that doesn't make sense, and she has her people move the stone away from the front of the tomb. And Jesus stands in front of the tomb, and he says Lazarus' name, like he says our names, like he will say your name someday standing at your grave, like he will say my parents' names as he stands in front of their graves. He will say our names. Melissa, John, Carl, Magdalene, Andy, come out. He does this nowadays because the resurrection breaks into our lives now, into our tombs. Come on out. And here comes Lazarus, all bound up in his grave clothes, all tied up. Now notice something. Jesus does not wave his magic wand. Okay? Jesus does not wave his magic wand and make all bad things never happen to his people. That's not how it goes. Jesus does not walk into Bethany and wave his magic wand and raise Lazarus from the dead. No, first he weeps with us. First he hears our cries that this doesn't make sense. This is how God is. This is what God is like. Jesus does not wave his magic wand and poof, all of Lazarus' grave clothes go flying off in all directions. No, this would have been a great internet meme. This would have gone viral on TikTok. Poof! Wouldn't it be great? But no, that's not what God is like. God calls you and me to be a part of the resurrection at work and powerful in the world. So we unbind each other. And we unbind our neighbors. And we unbind the creation. And we unbind people on the other side of the world that we've never even known. We are a part of God's resurrection, which waits for us beyond the grave, but which right now is a part of our being today. One final note on this story. Soon after Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, Lazarus and Mary and Martha have Jesus over to dinner. Now, this was a big deal because if you had somebody to dinner, that meant that you were one of their people, that you supported them, that you were part of their community. And this was public. People could see this. People watched. It was an event in the village. They have Jesus to dinner. And people are now out to get Jesus. They want to kill Jesus. They also want to kill Lazarus at this point. It's not safe. It's not safe. But at the dinner, Mary takes some perfumed oil, vastly expensive, and she pours it out on Jesus' feet with this intimate expression of love and devotion. And she wipes his feet with her hair. And it says that the fragrance of this ointment, this perfumed oil, fills the house, fills the whole house. And now we have a contrast between the stench of the tomb and the fragrance that fills the house, the stench of death and the fragrance of God's life that fills the house, that fills the world. This is what God is like. So when I meet with people who are planning a funeral for their loved one, I tell them I'm going to talk about Jesus. And I'm going to talk about Jesus and his cross and resurrection. I'm going to talk about heaven, that our loved ones are there. This is where we are going, and we will meet them. Thanks be to God.